here we are.
Little tangent. Have you ever played the game Pandemic?
I have not.
Oh, it's fantastic.
You mean other than what we're doing right now, like an actual game?
There's an actual board game called Pandemic. It's one of my favorite board games that there is, and it would be a fun way to like get kids into epidemiology, actually, because you have the whole globe and there's viruses popping up, and you got to do different things to control them. It's really fun. Anyway, I'm still caught up on the fact that people didn't like epidemiology. But how are your teacher reviews now that there's a global pandemic? Have people been appreciating you a bit more?
Last year, everything was a little weird because we were teaching virtually.
Yeah, that's a sampling error right there. You can't really tell anything from that. Yeah, so we just kind of ignore
that year. I mean, honestly, usually my teaching reviews are pretty good because fortunately I don't teach the direct epidemiology. I teach more of applied epidemiology with zoonotic diseases.
What's that mean?
Well, so when you actually teach epidemiology, you're teaching, okay, what's the difference between prevalence and incidence, and how do you calculate risk rates and sensitivity and specificity? And so they get bogged down in doing the math. And so I actually take those concepts and apply them to, okay, let's talk about West Nile virus or Rocky Mountain spotted fever or rabies or things like that. And so take those concepts, but actually apply them to a certain disease so that they've got this little baseline that they learn before they get me. So the class is split in half, essentially. And so my colleague, he gets stuck teaching okay, here's how you calculate sensitivity. And they all go, do I really need to know this? So usually I can get decent student reviews by, coming up with fun stories. Whenever I talk about...
Sorry. It was actually my very next question was what gets people's ears perked up? Because when you say, can I guess?
Yeah.
Rabies.
Yeah, rabies, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, so because rabies,
gets people interested.
It's usually like 2 or 3 lectures, and I tell various stories, and one of the stories that's always humorous is I think it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. You can get on these listservs about disease outbreaks or individual cases of particularly rabies, and there was a rabid beaver at a lake in North Carolina that was attacking people.
I just had this whole conversation with my uncle got bit by a beaver one time, a rabid bever.
That had to hurt. Their teeth are huge.
Their teeth are so huge and they can cut through trees and everything. Cause I've been getting into beavers lately because I got into stand-up paddleboarding lately. Okay. Yeah. And there's these areas around me that I've been going where I see beavers, and they're exceptionally skittish creatures, and they have, you can't get, even if you're floating and very quiet and you just are floating toward them and don't move, they'll see their whole tail situation. It's for storing fat as well, but the reason why it's flat is to slap and scare things off, and you can't get anywhere near one of those things. And so rabies must be a heck of a thing if it's making beavers turn the other way and be like, I'm gonna attack that crazy bearded guy on a device I've never seen before who's holding a huge stick.
Yeah, so that's one of the stories that usually the students are like, what? Really? And so then you use those little stories like that to catch them, and then they get
interesting.
Yeah.
What's up with rabies? Can you? I know we didn't plan on talking about all this, but I'm having too much fun, and I want to know because I was having arguments with people about this recently. I'm like, you can't. People are like, you should watch out for those beavers, just because my uncle had, when it's like when someone had something like bizarre impact them, and then it's like the availability heuristic or whatever, they think it's more of a prevalent situation than it actually is. And so I've been having beaver arguments with the fam recently, and
not a common thing.
not a common thing at all. How does a beaver get raped? Is rabies just pervasive amongst many species? Can a lot of different things?
So it can infect any mammal.
Wow.
And so pretty much. So
that's
it's
amazing.
Kind of weird. So you think most viruses are pretty species specific. Rabies is not. And so rabies can infect pretty much any mammal. Some are a little bit more resistant. So for whatever reasons, like opossums, our Virginia opossums that we have in North America, just about never get rabies.
Oh,
There's
wow.
theories as to why. I'm not exactly sure, but yeah. So typically, like our rodents, you usually don't see a whole lot of rabies in rodents because most of our rodents are small, and so if you have a rabid animal bite them, they just die from the
Probably
wounds,
dead.
right?
Yeah.
And so the only rodents that usually will be diagnosed with rabies are groundhogs or woodchucks and beavers, because if they get
Something
bitten by,
that can survive a fight.
yeah, so it
Okay,
survives a
that's so
fight, goes off,
fascinating.
and a month or two later, all of a sudden it's got rabies. But yeah, it's only the bigger ones that
A
can
month or two later,
Well-
you just think you got away, and then you just start acting a little wonky.
Yep. Yeah, and so another fun thing about rabies, if you don't know this, it actually travels. The virus physically travels up the neurons and has to go all the way to the brain.
Yeah.
So, like, if you get bitten on your big toe, your incubation period will be longer than if you get bitten on the face.
Wow. Because I saw some weird thing. Was it just someone telling me about this? Either way, it sounded like BS, but they were like, if you get bit by something that's rabid, you have like 48 hours or you're a goner.
No, that's not true. Unless you
Okay.
get, like, bitten in the brain. Which
If
probably
you
is
get
not
bit
going
in
to
the
happen.
brain, get to a hospital
Yeah,
for
quick.
rabid or not.
No, so like the incubation for people usually is at least like a month or two. Like you don't want to dilly dally. Go ahead. Well, especially because like most people don't have rabies vaccines on board. So
I imagine someone just kind of getting like slightly rabid, and then they're like, "Yeah, I'll get to it tomorrow."
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, no. Usually, once people or animals, once they start to have symptoms of rabies, they usually die.
oh wow.
Yeah, there's a very
so
small
within
handful of
that-
people that have survived, but it's almost 100% fatality. So, like, if you do get bitten by a rabid animal, so they actually just recently changed the importation laws that dogs from certain countries, I believe it's in like Eastern Europe where there's a big rabies problem, that they're very much not allowing those importations because it's, they're incubating as they're traveling and then they end up with rabies a month or two later.
Amazing. So, holy cow, that is. And then you're a goner. By the time you have symptoms, it's too late.
Yeah, there's a handful of people that have survived, but it's rare.
Wow. That is so good to know, because I got to be honest with you. I'm like the type to get bit by a wild animal and be like, whatever.
It's fine. Yeah,
I'll put some hydrogen peroxide on it.
Yeah, depending on the animal. So certainly, like, I don't know where you actually are, but there's
I'm in Wisconsin.
Okay, yeah. So you probably have foxes. I don't know if you've got a ton of terrestrial rabies up there. You probably have some. But like we've got raccoons and foxes and skunks down here, and then bats are everywhere that could potentially spread it.
Yeah, we got some of that going on. Because isn't it, once you get rabies, or when a mammal gets rabies, doesn't it, it just releases just tons of cortisol or something, right? You're just like amped up, like the stress hormone all the time.
You mean that's why that's why they act crazy?
And then like can't they also, doesn't it shut down the ability to sleep? And they can't sleep for like days, and then I think you can't salivate or something.
Well, you can't swallow. So it
you can't swallow, or you can salivate, but you can't swallow. So you're basically
thirsty salivating,
and you can't. Oh, that maybe that's what it is. You're like starving because you can't swallow, and then you're foaming. And
if you're in the mouth, you've got all this spit in your mouth that you can't swallow, and then that also because it's transmitted in saliva, so that you've got all that saliva with the rabies in it. Yeah, it's good. So basically, it paralyzes the swallowing muscles, and you end up with all this spit full of rabies.